This review has the following corporate sponsors. Tonight, the most boring sport in the world has its own movie. Can anyone entice someone like me to be interested in Formula One in movie form? Well, I'll tell you if you let me. Yes, that's right. As I've intimated, I'm not a fan of F1. Registered trademark. Not at all. I have no interest in motorsports of any kind. It is for me one of the dullest spectacles in the world. Maybe if you're there and you get to see your favourite driver once a lap, for a few seconds, it's amazing. But on TV, it is a mind-numbingly repetitious spectacle in which there is no greater gap, I think, between the thrill experienced by the people doing it and those watching it. At least if you're watching football, you can kind of, get into the spirit of the thing. Imagine yourself on the pitch, heading the ball or giving it a tap in, from a few yards. But you're never going to be, a Formula One driver. And you can't even hope to be one. And even the normal experience of driving doesn't come anywhere close. And watching some flickering video of somebody sat in a stationary position in a car doesn't put you with them in that driver's seat. And the closest I've come to Formula One was a man I used to know called Stephen Godson, who would drink copiously after the pub and then offer you a lift home and insist that you took it whether you wanted it or not. And then your life was in your own hands. You got home in about 10 minutes. But, well, brings me out in cold sweats even thinking about that ride home. But it's funny in a way that I shouldn't give a shit about F1 or motor racing or anything like that, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for motorsports. You see, my grandparents met at Le Mans 55. It's a rather romantic story, if I don't say so myself. You may know Le Mans 55 as a disaster, which a driver called Pierre Levay sort of clipped another car and went into the spectators and dropped out of the car himself and died. But the wreckage of the car decapitated people. It was dreadful, absolutely awful, a catastrophe. And no worse for any man than my poor grandfather, whose date was savagely decapitated by a piece of debris from Levay's car. But luckily, someone else in the crowd took good care of him, saw that he was, in shock and suffering and bleeding, and they bonded in the moment. What can I tell you? The Florence Nightingale effect from Back to the Future, and became a couple, and the rest is history. So my grandfather went to Le Mans 55 with one girl, and he left with another. Isn't that lovely? Always thought that was a charming story. Anyway, hopes were not high for this, for F1, registered trademark, the movie. Good that they call it F1, the movie, because, of course, that's what everybody else would call it. And that precise match between movie as we might imagine it and movie as delivered, the closeness of those two is something that we'll come back to, because actually it's quite significant in this case. I went to the cinema. Where else? Not the racetrack. There were no screenings there. I went and looked, and I sat in seat F1. Yes, that's right, F1. I thought that was a funny thing to do. Didn't do much for my neck, because obviously I was very far off to the left of the auditorium. But at least I escaped the main cluster of people, including the teenagers at the back, who one of whom had been forced to bring their sister with them, and they left her in the cinema about a third of the way through, presumably to go to the toilets to have sex. They were gone about half an hour. Little subplot for me that you won't have when you go to see F1 : the movie. Tony Benn, the Labour politician, famously said, every generation has to fight the same battles. And I always think of that quote because I think actually we live in a world where every generation has to watch the same movies. Or at least our generation have to watch the same movies as the previous generation. The cruel trick being that we're the same people, if you're my age, because there have been no new ideas in mainstream movie making for approximately the last 30 years. So, we've got an upcoming, the 7th movie in the Jurassic Park series. We'll soon have another Star Wars and all the rest of it. It's all very repetitious, isn't it? And I was thinking about the movie Days of Thunder from 1990 with Tom Cruise, because that was a Tony Scott, Jerry Bruckheimer produced movie that followed on a few years after Top Gun.
Where I come from, it doesn't matter which end of the car goes around the corner first.
Hold on a minute. Don't you think we ought to talk?
What, about how I'm going to run? Sure.
Or how you managed to live as long as you have?
There's nothing I can't do with a race car. You run good. Thank you. I want to see how you do in the crowd.
We can fix it right here. Now what's it gonna be?
Tell me what you love about racing so much.
Speed. Come up here and do it. I'll take you to a race.
I can't. I'm a doctor. I'm cold.
I don't want you to hold a bad opinion of Cole. He needs reassurance from you that he's okay. And after all, you're his doctor.
How long before you find out if you're really good? Are you really lucky?
Now you're scared. You're scared.
He doesn't believe you can drive anymore.
I'll take your word for what a car can do. But I'm not taking anybody's word for what I can do, because nobody knows.
Get back in that car, you'll die.
Same director as Top Gun, same star, same idea, monetized, visceral thrills. We've done planes, let's do racing. Jerry Bruckheimer is also the producer of F1 the movie, and Joseph Kosinski, the director of F1 the movie, is the director of 2023's Top Gun : Maverick. So Jerry Bruckheimer obviously has had a sort of generational spasm and said, well, fuck it, we did it in the 80s and early 90s, let's do it again. We'll have the same director and indeed, this movie was initially conceived, would you believe, as a direct sequel to Days of Thunder, like Top Gun Maverick, the sequel to Top Gun. But they couldn't quite make that work, and presumably Tom Cruise was too busy doing stunt somewhere and he couldn't be asked to go back to the world of motor racing. So they chose not to do that. And also they probably realised there wasn't much money in a standalone driving movie. But there's a lot of money in something pegged to a global sports brand like F1 registered trademark. You know, if you're going to make a football movie, would you just make it about your local five-a-side team, or would you make Premier League : the movie? Well, you'd do that, wouldn't you? And in keeping with that analogy, if it was Premier League : the movie, it would be about a made-up club promoted to the Premier League, trying to survive in the Premier League, featuring all the clubs that you know and love, but all portrayed, of course, as honourable and fair and benign. Yeah, I know, even Man City. Don't know how they'd make that work, but, you know. But all in the spirit of earnest competition. And that's what we get here. You know, Brad Shid is a old driver, down on his luck. You know, was he a has-been or a never-been, as they say in the movie? He used to be a contender, then he had a crash, and then he wasn't a contender anymore, and his old friend Javier Bardem, flaxen mane from Skyfall, comes and says to him, "Hey, my team, my fictional F1 team's doing terribly. I'm going to be taken over by the blood-sucking corporate scum that bankroll the enterprise unless I can win a Grand Prix. Please help me. Please come back and help me." It's a redemption arc for us both, as we're both failed Formula One drivers. Will you do it? Will you come back? Brad Pitt, who's been paid $30 million to be in this thing. Yes, he says, I will. I'll do it. Why not? And he does. And, you know the rest. Because you've seen it time and time and time again. Particularly a generation ago. It's every aspirational sports movie you've ever seen. And so it does give you, it does lend itself to the question, can a corporate brand extension like F1: the movie have a soul? And Kosinski and screenwriter Aaron Kruger do what they can. They pull out all the stops to try and convince you that this is a real film, not a grotesque piece of corporate advertising masquerading as a movie. And how do they do that? Well, they pull in every genre cliche they can think of. The redemption arc for the failed driver chasing one shot at glory, vicarious success for the old driver turned team owner who's also looking for one last shot at glory. There's a love interest for Brad Pitt that doubles as a carefully demographically targeted, girls can succeed in tech and racing bit of subplotting. She's not just eye candy. She's not just a sex object. She's not just a girlfriend cheering from the stands. She's a techie. She's designed their car, their failing car. So you see, girls, you can succeed in racing too. F1 is a brand for you. Don't think you can't do it. This movie is here to tell you you can, even if in reality you probably can't. On top of all of that, you've got the arrogant rookie who learns a little bit of a life lesson from the world-weary, stoic, seen-it-all-before older man and mentor. And on top of all of that, just to affirm that F1 has a heart and is not just about corporate sponsorship and greed. there is a subplot about a bastard in the hole, the sleaze, the F1 know-nothing on the board of the team who plans to eject Bardem and take it over, and in that slathery way put all that capitalist muci all over it. He tries to coerce Brad to join him, and Brad gives him the finger, because it's not about that man, it's about romance. Pitt rebuffs the traitor in the group, and keeps the wolf of capitalism, pure capitalism, from the door, because racing, you see, is about flying, it's about dreaming, it's about transcendence, it's about joy, it's about the inner fight, the will to succeed. I'm just going to tell you can't succeed in life. You're going to overcome your demons, you're going to win.
I'll take your word for what a car can do, but I'm not taking anybody's word for what I can do.
Now, can you reconcile all of this with a movie that has an enormous budget inflated by copious amounts of product placement? A movie that only exists to promote the F1 brand and try and reach areas that the boring sport alone can't reach. Can it convince a cynic like me, somebody who frankly would rather spend his Sundays raking up weeds in the unforgiving, blistering sun than watch F1 on TV, to actually take an interest in this sport? Well, yeah, almost. Because I can't lie to you, I could, it would get me off the hook if I said, God, it didn't do anything for me really. But these elements are very polished that I've mentioned. These cliches come together to form, if you like, the perfect Hollywood blockbuster. It's so finely tuned, like a perfect F1 vehicle, handled with such precision and such focus that you do, God help you, feel something. You do feel that thrill on the track. It's all done practically, seamlessly, or rather, you can't see the join between the practical driving and any visual effects that have been employed. The credits tell you there were plenty, but you can't see them. So invisible visual effects, great driving, pounding, Vangelis-inspired score by Hans Zimmer, plus a few middle-of-the-road contemporary songs. And, yeah, it works. It has its effect on you. It does that hypnotic thing of pulling you in and getting the pulse racing a bit more than it usually would. That could just be all of the junk and crap you brought into the cinema with you. I don't know. So it's a sugar high of a movie. It stirs the emotions. It's a fist pump of a movie. But it doesn't quite have as much heart as, say, Ford versus Ferrari. And if I ask myself why not, I say maybe because it's just a little bit too careful, a bit too brand managed. There's no danger of this being mistaken for anything like a Maverick bit of filmmaking. There's not. Maverick, little reference to Top Gun there. There's no sense of personality or individual human agency behind this polished product. This is committee-made movie making in the best possible sense, in that there's nothing wrong with it, but it's like a Pixar movie. There's nothing human or spontaneous about it either. When you watch a Quentin Tarantino movie, you know that there's something of him in there, there's going to be something off-kilter or surprising or unusual. You can never mistake one of his movies for something made by AI, but F1 : the movie could very well have been written by AI, albeit a sophisticated AI. Because there's absolutely no surprises in it whatsoever. And it's very old-fashioned in its way. And it will delight fans of old-school blockbusters who will say, great, they do make them like they used to. Except they make them like they used to so well in cases like this that it makes you yearn for something new. You know, we've seen it all. We've seen every beat, every reversal. We've seen that moment of underdog triumph 100,000 times. People clapping and cheering and hugging one another. When are we going to get something different? When are we going to go to the cinema one summer and actually be bowled over by a new concept? A genuinely stunning piece of auteur filmmaking that makes you think, yes, this is it. This is the new generational touchstone. Not just something that's been reworked from ideas which are decades and decades old.
Il est à nous. En route.
Ôtez le casque, déshabillez-le. Vite.
It's not a perfect movie. The one thing that irritated me about it was the commentary, the F1 commentary. It's very difficult with F1 because most people like me won't have a clue what the rules of F1 are, won't give a toss. But they have to be explained to us because if we don't know the rules of the game, how are we to partake in what Brad Pitt's doing and his strategic approach to racing? Or what the team are doing. So the compromise they settle on is this weird kind of commentary that also doubles as a read through the rule book. You know, the kind of sports commentary that never occurs in the real world. Sometimes sports commentary pauses to discuss a point of law in the game or a rule. But you don't get football commentators, for example, who say, and, you know, Paul Manbreed has just passed a Joe kickback and Manuel Pestakovic, because that's what you have to do in a game of football. Move the ball into the opponent's half to score a goal. You don't get that in a game of football, do you? The presumption is that the audience know how the game is played, broadly speaking. And by the way, Paul Manbreed is one of England's finest footballers. That or Keith Death Blossom, one of the two. It's hard to weigh him up really objectively. But look, that aside, that need to inculcate us in the rules of F1, so we'll give a toss. F1, sterling effort. But alas, ladies and gentlemen, the hunt for the next generational touchstone, the new blockbuster, goes on. Till next time, I'm Dr. Macclevoid saying...
I knew if I watched you, you'd make a mistake. The canvas can dry. You'll have to coach him better than that, Miss Redland.
Alex, is that you?
Nibble my ear.